Hello everyone and welcome to my review of One Night to the Beyond. In the background you're going to be seeing my second playthrough with John. I was originally going to show that in my Let's Play, but I decided to include that as footage instead. When I get further into the review, you'll understand why. So let's start off with the good points on this game. The game has a really nice atmosphere. It's not creepy. It's not quite as creepy as the first game was, but it still has that very strong vibe that something's weird going. That something is weird. And with that atmosphere, the visuals were nice. The music was very well done. I love the selection of music, as well as the composition that was done. That has been well improved on, which is very nice. I enjoyed the music thoroughly. And a lot of the sound effects were really well done too. Some of the sound effects, though, especially when you're in the inventory, had a few problems with artifacts or clicking going on. And when you have something like that in the inventory, where you're going through everything really fast, that clicking gets really annoying. And from here on, this game is going to start to go downhill, as in my review. So, yeah. Next I want to talk about the puzzles. The puzzles are very simplified compared to the first game. I believe that was due to the developer getting a lot of complaints about the puzzles being too hard, having to refer to the walkthrough for a lot of them, and I can understand that. However, with the puzzles, it seemed almost too simple. Especially when I get into one of the characters. The puzzles weren't bad, but I didn't enjoy them quite as much as I did in the first game. I do like challenging puzzles, even if I can't solve them. But, you know. I'll get into the puzzles later on when I start talking about one of the characters. Now, the biggest change, one of the biggest changes, was the combat. In the first game, you basically just ran around and tried to avoid monsters. When you were trying to harm a monster, you would have a defensive item. Different defensive items would have different levels of how lethal they were. Some would do just a little bit of damage, some would stun, some would kill outright. To use a defensive item, you just walked up to a monster, and it would use your best defensive item that you had. One-time use, your defensive item was done. If you ran out of defensive items, however, you had no way to defend yourself. You had to avoid every single monster that came in your path. Because otherwise, if you walked into them, they would hurt you instead. And I think it took about 4 to 5 hits to kill you. That was the combat system. In this game, however, the combat system had almost a complete overhaul. There are very few monsters compared to the first game. In the first game, you had monsters everywhere. Literally everywhere, except for the safe rooms. In this game, every single monster was in an enclosed space, and when the monsters showed up, they showed up after you picked something up that was vital for progression. And all the doors to other areas would close. You could not escape from them. You were forced to fight them. And these enemies, you could actually fight against. You'd start off the same way. You'd walk up to them, and instead of, however, of using a defensive item, you would get 3 choices. You could either strike normally, which would do your basic amount of damage. You could attempt to negate damage, or brace yourself, basically, which would reduce or negate damage altogether. Or you could strike hard. The striking hard system uses basically a new mechanic with your mana, if you were in a different game, or in this game, your strength. You had a limited amount, and it would supposedly do extra damage. I say supposedly because I used the strike hard option rather a lot, and it didn't seem to do that much more damage on the whole than the normal strike did. It would maybe do 3 or 4 more damage, but that was it. It didn't seem to do that much for the combat. So I'm not sure what exactly the thought was behind that, or how it was calculated, or any of that. So that was kind of Now with this game, you also had a lot more health overall. You didn't take 5 hits and you'd die. You would be dealt a certain amount of damage, just some random number, every time you went up against a monster and fought. You could either take damage, or you could negate the damage, or you could dodge completely. And a lot of the times I may have been lucky, but I ended up negating damage or dodging a lot, and that doesn't make for that terrifying of an experience. It makes for a rather amusing one if you're in a boxing match or something, but this is supposed to be a horror game, not a fighting simulator. So the combat, I think, had some potential. I could see where they were going with it, but there were too many problems that didn't contribute to the horror like the first game's combat system did. So that's basically the combat. Now, with the characters and the story. First one night, you take place in a lab facility, or in a compound, where something goes horribly wrong. There's been a merging of dimensions or something, and all these monsters from that dimension are coming into ours and just wrecking havoc on the place. This game is more along the lines of it starts off more along the lines of a basic haunted house. There's something wrong with it, but it seems almost like it's the cliche of ghosts and evil spirits being there and drawing upon your energy to feed themselves, drawing upon your negative energy and your fear. And that didn't bother me any, but what did bother me was kind of the stories. In this game, you had 2 characters you could play as. You could either play as John, or you could play as Sarah. John is the tougher of the 2. He's supposedly not as smart as Sarah, so he's not necessarily not as smart, but he's not good at puzzles. However, he has increased life, and he has extra strength. Sarah does not. She has the basic 100 health, and 10 strength. John, on the other hand, has 135 health and 15 strength. Every hard strike uses 2 strength. And there were certain doors and drawers that you could only open if you had strength. Those would depend on the door and the drawer. Some had 2, some were 3, some were 4, or something like that. I don't remember all of them. Sarah's only benefit was that you would get hints on how to solve the puzzles by words in whatever the puzzle thing was would be a different color. Considering that the puzzles were simplified in this game, it makes Sarah's perk almost useless. There's really no point to playing her, unless you want more of a challenge with the fights, because you don't have as much strength and you don't have as much health. That's the only difference to playing her. You want a different story? Well, sorry. The stories are almost identical between the characters. Not necessarily that they have the same kind of story layout and stuff. They go through the exact same routes. They solve the puzzles the same way in the same order. Nothing changes between them, with a little bit of dialogue, and spoiler, who dies. It's always going to be the character you're not playing as. The first time you're playing with one of the characters, this can add to the horror. But when you have both characters dying like that for the other character playthrough, it suddenly raises a lot of questions as to why. And it does not contribute to the horror factor any longer. It just makes it confusing. So a lot of thought that should have been put into this, and just a few changes, just a couple little changes here and there, would have made the story that much better, and it would have made it worth a replay. However, because of the staleness between these two stories, as far as diversity is concerned, the second playthrough was not worth it at all. And playing as Sarah is only worth it for the challenge, not for the puzzle perk, because the puzzles are so simplified compared to the first game. If the puzzles were as difficult as the first game, there would be a point to playing Sarah, because she would have the hints that John would not. But the puzzles are not that difficult, so there's no point. This game also has multiple endings, 2 for each character, a good and a bad ending. Those endings aren't satisfying. They don't answer any of the questions, they're just a continuation of the story. That's another problem with this game, however. Each of the endings isn't satisfying in that it doesn't answer questions that you had along the line. Normally in a horror game, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing because you want some unanswered questions to kind of make you wonder what the hell is going on. You know, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why is it this way? In this game, however, all the questions that you had were not ones that contributed to the horror. They were all questions that kind of took you out of it. Or just didn't have any purpose whatsoever. At least in my case. You know, why did both characters die? Is that, it's probably just because of the developer not thinking about it, or being lazy. But even the answers that you could come up with that would be plausible for that don't contribute to the horror at all. And I would say that the developer was lazy on this game, except for the fact that he worked on One Night 1.5 and completely scrapped the idea. And in one of the Easter eggs, he actually talks about why he scrapped that game and some of the characters and enemies that he would have in that game that he ended up removing to make this one. I think that this game had a lot of ideas put into it and a lot of potential, but I think it was executed poorly. Which is a real shame because this game could have been really nice. The other problem I have with it is that it is about 20 years ahead, or behind, 20 years before, there we go, time prepositions for you. It is about 20 years before the events of One Night 1. But there aren't any real tie-ins. There are honorable mentions, like Alex Marcani and his industry, but that's it. There's no real tie-in to the first game. There is a third game in the installment, however, that's already come out, that may tie the two together somehow. Don't know, haven't played it yet, we'll find out when I play that game. But I was really disappointed. I was left very unsatisfied by this game, even though I got three of the 4 endings. I got both endings for John, and I got the bad ending for Sarah. They, like I said, they don't contribute any to answering questions or presenting new ones that kind of make you go, whoa, you know, mind blown kind of thing. Or just contributing to the horror factor at all. It just kind of, it continues the story. It doesn't give you any real solid anything. This game feels kind of like fluff, which is a really big disappointment considering how much work I think the developer put into this game. So, but it is how it is now. It is a lot of work that didn't come out as fruitful. So, it's a bummer. But sometimes you have that. So, I would not recommend playing this game unless it somehow ties into the third one. So, I mean, if you want to play it, you can. The link is in the description for a download for One Night to the Beyond. So, if you want to try this for yourself, make your own opinion, you're perfectly welcome. I would actually recommend that you do, in case you find something that I didn't. So, yeah. Now, in order to get the good endings, I didn't talk about this all that much in the actual game, in the actual Let's Play, but in the game, you can get a good ending for both characters. If you don't meet the prerequisites for the good ending, you are going to get the bad ending, no matter what. For the good ending, you need to save less than 4 times. You need to use a medkit less than 3 times, and you need to find the special item, or the Shadow Pendant, which has a rather complex puzzle without the hints. I don't know if you get the hints for Sarah, but what I did not realize was you actually have to look at the person rather than what the ultimate treasure is. And the hints for for each answer of the puzzle is in the Shadow Tomes. So, I'm not going to spoil anything in that regard. I'm not going to spoil that puzzle. But it doesn't get you much of anything, because it doesn't answer any more questions. It doesn't add any questions. It doesn't contribute to the story much at all. It just has a different ending. That's about it. So this game is rather unsatisfactory. If you guys want to play it, you can. But I did not enjoy this game nearly as much as I enjoyed the first one. So it's a disappointment. But yeah, this is the end of my review. I will go and play the third game, nonetheless, and hopefully that will kind of boost everything back up, make everything cool again. So yeah, until the next time when I see you guys, have a great day, everyone. See you in the next Let's Play. Bye for now.